Welcome to the Moments That Matter podcast. I am your host, Laura Escamilla.
And I am your co-host, Isaac Escamilla.
And today we are going to discuss something that's not fun to talk about. It's just going to be the two of us. But I wanted to point out some information about student loans. While I've been out talking to parents and reading a lot of articles as student debt becomes more of a major topic now, more and more comments from parents and hear more and more from parents on how when they went to school, they paid for it on their own. They didn't get any help from their parents. A lot of attitudes from parents today are that their kids should be able to do the same and figure it out for themselves on how to pay for college. So I really wanted to break down what it looks like for a student without the support of their parent.
It's a little different than it was when we were in college. I did take out the bulk of my student loans and my parents didn't help me with any.
Right. And that changed a decade or two ago where they wanted to reduce student debt. And the way to do that, they pushed the burden on the parent because the student was borrowing so much money like we did. And they didn't have jobs. We didn't have jobs. We didn't have a way to pay it back. Parents do. Parents, for the most part, have incomes and jobs. So they push that burden to parents and they do parent plus loans. But there is a certain amount of money that students can borrow on their own without their parents, but FAFSA does have to be filled out. So step one is important for parents having to help their child with FAFSA. There is really no workaround in a situation, whether the parent wants to or not, to say, oh, they're independent. They're going to take care of themselves. They're going to pay their own car. They're going to pay their own bills. They're independent. It doesn't matter what the parent feels about the student being independent or dependent. The government doesn't see it the same way. The government sees the child as part of their dependence, just like they do on taxes and what have you. That is, the parent has to be a part of. It's the same with the insurance. They get covered until they're 26. Unless the child has a child of their own or is married or is in the military, there are very few circumstances where the parent can just hands off, my child is independent.
Okay, so short of those few exceptions, do students have a limit as to how much money they can borrow per semester or per year? There is a limit, correct?
Yes, so that's what I wanted to discuss because I don't feel like parents understand what that is. And they're like, oh, my student will take out the loan. And when you're talking about tuition, even in local tuition costs, that amount doesn't cover what they think. So if you're a middle income family and your student doesn't qualify for Pell Grants, they're not going to have free money. So they have to turn to student loans. Sometimes they do get some grants, but they still have to fill in the gap, right, of
Sure.
what the total tuition
cost of attendance, correct?
Or cost of tuition if they're living at home. For freshmen with 0 to 29 credit hours, the student can borrow a maximum of $5,500
For the year?
For that year. It's split by semester. That's, what does that break down? $2,750 a semester.
That's not a lot.
But that's not going to cover. The difference of that has to come from somewhere. I don't think, like I said, I don't think parents realize that there is a limit to what the student can borrow. The system is set up beautifully, I think. The student won't graduate with more than $30,000 in debt of their own debt.
Okay.
With under their name after 4 years. So from after the $5,500, the following year, they can go to $6,500.
Year 2.
The following year, they can go to $7,500.
Okay, year 3, $75.
And year 4 also.
Okay.
So that's the max the student can borrow without the parent intervening.
I understand.
At that point, the parent only fills out the FAFSA.
Okay.
So, but still $7,500, that's $3,750 a semester. That's not going to cover even your local university.
Right.
In tuition. So the rest has to come from somewhere. Hopefully the parents have saved. Most likely they didn't save enough. The student can work, obviously, or they qualify for grants. But again, my biggest concern is for middle income families. It is parents who have a college education themselves, who have this mentality that they did it themselves without the help of their parents. So their kids can do it too.
Correct. But the rules have changed.
The rules have changed. And I just want people to grasp what that looks like for a student. So after that, if there's still money needs to be paid, the parent has to pay the difference.
Yes.
Or the student, like I said, they can do other things, but to get to 10,000 a semester, or some schools 30, 40, depending on where they're going to go to school.
Correct.
This is hard to do,
Right.
obviously.
So that definitely limits the universities and colleges that they can attend
Right.
based on the cost of attendance and perhaps having to live away from home. So you would say that the likelihood of them being able to go to college, they probably have to go to a college where they live at home
In those
in the best
situations.
case scenarios.
So I just want to get rid of, I guess for me as a scholarship provider, that notion that a parent may have today to say they can figure it out on their own. They can take out the loans. They're going to have these student loans. And there's so much talk about student loan debt, and it's like in the hundreds of thousands. And that is accurate, but it's accurate for our generation. We took out those loans,
Understood.
and the interest grew on them. And that's a whole other conversation. And they've ballooned, no matter if we're paying or not, into these huge amounts. But today's students, they're graduating with a max of 30,000 for their undergrad. When they get to graduate school, that's different. They can borrow on their own. They are considered independent. But undergrad, freshmen going to college,
Right. They won't be able
5,500.
to get into law school or medical school or any of those professional degrees unless they finished an undergrad anyway. So that barrier to entry is real.
Yeah.
So what options, out of curiosity, do parents have?
So again, the parents saved and have money,
Yes.
which most likely they don't. I'm going for my doctorate, and I did a survey of 20 parents who are all educated, some masters, some doctorates,
Yes.
and talking about all of them with kids in college. And the notion is that they thought they were prepared, but in reality, they didn't have enough saved, even though they had saved, even though they thought they were
Yes.
prepared. And then there's people like us, right, who our kids, we are middle income now, but when we had our kids, we didn't have 2 cents
Sure.
to spend on anything. We were just trying to get by.
That is true.
So we didn't save a lot for them.
No, we did not.
We're just figuring it out like everybody else. So I guess what I'm trying to get to with this is parents need to understand that if after that there is a parent plus loan, I am not condoning loans. I'm not saying that parents have to do this. What I'm saying is I want parents to understand that if they don't help, somehow there are very little options for the student to do for themselves.
Now, there used to be, it used to be that other than those exceptions that you mentioned earlier, which is marriage, military, or
Having a child.
or having a child, you could become independent at a certain point in your life. Is there an age for that? Would a student have to wait until
24.
So a
Mhm.
student would have to wait until they're 24 years old. So ideally,
6 years
students,
after high
right,
school.
students would have graduated around 21 years of age, right?
Mhm.
So they'd have to wait 6 full years until they become independent and then begin that journey for their undergraduate degree and
Right.
finish their or their undergrad around 30 years old.
Right. Or they can go to a community college for a couple of years, which we've talked about. And we know that is a path
It
for
is.
some students. And financial reasons are often a reason to do that. But many of the parents that we talk to also have big dreams for their kids. They want their kids to go to these really great schools.
We
They
all
want
do.
them to leave. They want them to do all this stuff. But at the same rate, in the same sentence, or they're just going to have to figure it out. And there's a lot of that. I'm not going to borrow. I don't take out loans for my stuff. Why would I do it for them? And after Parent Plus loans, which is government loan, similar to what the student gets, but now for the parent.
Right. Now, I'm going to pause you right there. A Parent Plus loan, those do have the potential for student loan forgiveness somewhere along the road, right? Depending on where the parent may work.
Right. So those are taken under the parent's name, and you definitely want to consider public service loan forgiveness.
Yes.
Options that are available have been available for a long time. And the concept behind those is if you make payments for 10 years without any issues, that at the end, and you have been in public service the whole time, that includes teachers, that includes military, government entities,
Municipalities, things of that nature.
municipalities, nurses, those kind of situations, that if they work in low income areas, those nonprofits, then after the 10 years of making payments, the remainder of your loan would get forgiven. So if there are going to be situations where a parent is going to take out a Parent Plus loan, they would want to do it under the name of a parent if they're in that situation.
Okay. If they work for that
For
type
public
of entity.
service, right? And
As I understand it, on the flip side, we have private
right.
student loans.
So private loans, again, I'm not condoning loans in general. I just want the information to become available. Private loans, for one, the student can take out that loan with the parent co-signing. So the parent still has to put their name on the dotted line. If the student does not pay, the parent is responsible for that loan.
So there is no path for the student to do that on their own as
No,
far as a private loan. They must be co-signed.
they must be co-signed by the parent, even for a private loan, even if they have a bank account, even if they had a job, what have you, because the amount of a student loan is just too high and they have to have a cosigner. So if a parent's not willing to co-sign, there is no avenue forward for the student. And the same thing, the parent plus loan, the student can't take it. It has to be the parent under the parent's name.
By name, it is a parent plus
Right.
loan.
So the student's options are limited. It is the loan that's available to them by the government for a student loan, whether that be subsidized or unsubsidized, but that's it. 5,500 their first year. So the other thing about private loans is that a lot of companies are not doing them anymore. Like Discover used to be a huge student loan
I
provider.
remember seeing the
Yeah,
offers.
and now they're not doing that anymore. You really have to do your research, interest rates, and all of these situations. And those do not have an avenue for forgiveness. You pay them,
Those must be repaid no
must
matter
be
what.
repaid. And then it sounds morbid, but also the parent plus loan. If the parent should become deceased, that loan dies with them. It doesn't continue to the family.
It's a very morbid thought,
Yes,
but it
but
is realistic.
It is something that comes up.
Sure.
But that is not the case for a private loan. The debt continues with whoever's left in the family, like a mortgage or those kind of things.
Yes, indeed.
And one of the other things is that with a parent plus loan, a student loan, there are income driven payment plans. So if the student or the parent makes certain income, they will fix the payment to be a percentage of that income, and it can gradually increase through the year. There is situations for forbearance or deferment depending on financial situations.
Yes.
Those are not things available through a private lender.
Right.
Again, just putting it out there. So the reason this has come to mind is because there's a lot of talk out there about universities who are doing no loan colleges, right? Like they're going to guarantee that there will be no loans included in their financial aid packages to
That
students.
sounds good.
Yeah, students are going to graduate with zero debt, which is amazing. It sounds amazing.
Sounds ideal.
I want parents to be aware, though, that these packages, these offers, the schools are making are amazing. However, it is after the school financial aid, FAFSA, has determined how much the parent has to give. If FAFSA has determined that the parent has $20,000 to give, the school will fill in the difference and give grants, scholarships, or whatever to help the student up to the difference, to fill in that gap. And that gap, they guarantee, will not be filled with loans. But the parent still is sitting there having to figure out how to come up with the money that the government says they should have for it.
Correct.
So be very wary of those schools. And I think there's 46 throughout the country who are no loan schools.
Right.
So the student will graduate without debt, but now again, that's transferred to the parent. So that is the parent's burden
Or the parents will still have to figure out the total cost of attendance.
of what the government, the FAFSA, determines the parent should have to pay.
I see.
So that was the biggest thing that this conversation stemmed from, the understanding that you have to be very careful of the fine print, and you have to be very careful. Parents have to be very careful about their mentality about school loans. Of course, nobody wants debt. Of course, we all wish we could pay out of pocket and have enough saved. Of course, we don't want our kids to be in debt. Those are all obvious things. We want what's best for our children. But at the same rate, also, if there's somebody who does have to take out student loans, don't judge them for it. I hope I don't get judged because we had to take out parent plus loans for our kids. But we did what was best we thought, for our kids and our family.
Right.
So that's a very individual decision to make. But I just want parents to be careful when they're thinking they'll figure it out and they'll know. They have very limited resources these days. So it's not like it was when we were going to college. And I know we talk about it, the way things have changed now about applying to college and the way I have to think about what they want to do already. And all of these things have changed, but financial aid has changed too. These are conversations that need to be had. They're not comfortable. And talk to your children. Talk to your children and tell them what to expect. They should know that you can't afford it. They should know what you can afford. They should know what's coming up ahead. This is a very big bang, communicate.
Yes, and we talked about putting together that spreadsheet for applications for undergraduate schools, maybe your
Right.
junior year, and looking at the majors and what applies to you and what you want to do for your future.
Yeah.
And we've also talked about dual enrollment and how to, during high school, get a lot of those hours
Yeah.
done
Take
at a
advantage.
at a lower reduced, I mean, sometimes free.
I did a presentation recently to high school seniors, and it was at the beginning of the school year. They're looking to apply for schools. And I did a, does anybody know what the cost of attendance means? No one, right? And does anybody know how much their parents have saved for them to go to college? No one. Does anybody know how much it costs to go to college? They start naming schools. Okay, let's pull up the cost of attendance there.
Right.
It's 30,000 here. And they're like, a year? Yes, a year. Do your parents have that money to pay for it? Students don't think this through on their own. So parents need to be active in it and have an active conversation. Kids should know how much you have
Sure. And
to
for
help
those who
them.
don't know, can you once more let us know what is included in the cost of attendance?
Right. So cost of attendance is not just tuition. It is tuition, room and board, where they're going to live, how they're going to eat. It includes expenses such as getting a computer, travel, gas, those types of living expenses. Everything costs for the student to attend college. So there is a different cost of attendance if the student notes living at home. That cost of attendance looks different than students saying that they're living on campus or off campus,
Correct.
going away from school. The cost of attendance is different for every student in those situations. The cost of attendance is different for a student going out of state. Tuition is different for out of state
Yes, it
universities.
is.
So they have to know what the cost of attendance is. And no matter what, no matter where, no matter how, what you borrow, where you go to school, you can never borrow more than the cost of attendance. The school will never let you borrow more than the cost of attendance. It'll take you up to that point. That's it. If you get more scholarship dollars, and this happens with us all the time, the student has a lot of scholarships and they'll say, they've already reached cost of attendance. What do you want me to do? And it's just unused because the student has reached cost of attendance
Got
through
it.
other scholarships or what have you. So
So it's a
typically,
good problem to have. Like
yeah,
they've got everything covered.
yeah. In those cases, we usually try to make sure the school will apply the scholarship before they apply the loan.
Of course.
So to make sure that the loan is the least amount. But there is also schools that won't stack scholarships. They won't add them all up for you and put everything out there.
And every university is different. Every college is different. They
Every
have their own
school is
rules.
different. So that spreadsheet we talked about. But again, figure it out, have a conversation with your kids. FAFSA has been delayed. Everybody's waiting for financial aid packages to see where they're going to go to school right now.
Yes.
We're in early April. A lot of parents, a lot of kids right now don't know how much they're going to get from their school. They don't know what the financial aid packages are. And they're worried if they're deciding on what school to go to, how much they're going to get from school, how much merit aid, how much grant, need based aid.
Yes.
And that school loan is there for every student who fills out FAFSA. They can take it. Of course, they start paying it back as soon as they graduate or they drop out of school.
Yes.
However, anything that fills the gap, it's on the parent. So parents need to understand that. So I just want parents to be clear on it, students to be clear on it, have a conversation. This is all very relevant right now as current students who are trying to go to college in the fall are waiting to decide where they're going to go based on these financial aid packages.
Right. And the FAFSA, and because it's new and the problems they've been having and the delays related to that, some universities, I just read yesterday, the Baylor University is pushing back
Deposits,
their deposits
deadline, yeah.
by almost about a month or so.
So,
And
because you can't make a decision on where your kid's going to go to school if you don't know how much it's going to cost for them to go there. And
it's very difficult to commit to something if you don't know what the full cost
right.
is going to be.
But with that, usually when Lucas is in his second year, but we got that financial aid package in January. So we're months delayed. Schools are months delayed because of the FAFSA.
This is a very different scenario.
And schools need the FAFSA to figure out how much the parents have to contribute.
Right.
That is all FAFSA does, is determine how much the family has to contribute towards their education. The school goes and fills in the difference. So that is the biggest part of FAFSA. And if you don't help your child with FAFSA and fill out FAFSA, the school can't do that. and the school can't offer your child anything. And I've said this before. I just really felt that parents didn't understand that there were limits to what the student can do.
Just to recap, the total cost or the total amount that an undergraduate student can borrow on their own to cover college is 30,000 over the 4 years.
Over 4
And
years.
that's at every university in the United States, correct? It doesn't matter if one university is more expensive or less expensive than another.
That is the max.
That is the max that can be borrowed per student
Mhm.
for the entire 4 years. Okay, great.
So anything else, it's up to the parent. So this is my PSA. Have a conversation with your kids. Be aware of what loan limits are. Be aware of what you're capable of, and just have an honest conversation. This is really important as you move forward in any level of you're already in college, if your child is waiting to decide where to go to school, if they're planning to go to school, to college in the next year or two, in the next 4 years. Have a plan and figure it out. I don't see this changing anytime soon.
Agreed. Thank you.
Talk later.